everyone, and welcome to another episode of Open Tech Convo. Today we have Adrian McInman covering part 2 of a 3-part series on mental toughness. And without further ado, we're going to get right into it. If you've watched video 1, this should be a breeze for you. So please check out video 1 of the series, also on the same channel. Okay, Adrian, are you ready to get into it?
I am indeed.
All right. So we'll go with a few questions as the same format, and you'll give us your brilliant answers. So question number 1 for this video. Can you please briefly remind us of what mental toughness is?
And it's made up of 4 parts: challenge, commitment, control, and confidence. The first part, challenge, refers to the degree to which you see situations as fantastic opportunities and not threats. The second part, commitment, refers to the degree to which you are committed to your goals. The third part, control, refers to the degree to which you feel in control. And the fourth part, confidence, refers to the degree to which you believe you can do what needs to be done.
Thank you for that. I have a few questions from last week's interview. I finished by asking you for one quick piece of advice you would give to senior managers interested in mental toughness training for their staff. So what I would like to know is how they can do that, especially as this will require a lot of self-assessment.
Okay, everyone's different. What I would recommend is get yourself either a psychologist or a mental skills trainer, but ensure that whoever you get focuses on performance improvement. And then set up regular training. And what I found works really well is once a week or once every 10 days, i.e. 3 times a month. But do regular one-on-one private training. If you can't afford that, well, then you can go the group training approach and reduce the cost. And if you want a really cheap way, all you need to do is spend $6, $6 US, go to Amazon and buy my first book called Phenomenal Performances. And in that 472-page book, you will find a chapter on mental toughness and 2 chapters on parts of mental toughness like confidence and psychological hardiness. And what you want to do crucially is after you've read the introduction, answer 2 questions. After you read a chapter, answer 2 questions, etc. And the 2 questions are, 1, what was the main message in this section? And then 2, how do you use that information to make your life better? It is one thing to get some information, be it about mental toughness or anything for that matter, but it is totally a different thing to give yourself a concrete directive of what I must do to become a better person.
Thank you. Quite intriguing, I must say. What would you say to senior managers then who are simply not sold on the financial benefits of mental toughness?
Well, that's something I hear all the time when I first interact with businesses. It's not at all surprising. And I would say that, you really shouldn't just accept something without evidence. Thankfully for me, to be fully honest with you, the research is really quite compelling. It's quite easy to find good research that shows that mental toughness is very efficacious. For instance, let's just take one of the 4 dimensions of mental toughness. Let's just take commitment. There has been a number of studies done in the United States looking at that one-dimensional mental toughness, commitment, and looking at it with regard to engagement at work. And what you find is those who say they are the most committed to their goals actually tend to be the ones who are most engaged at work. And that blends in really nicely with some work by a guy who's got a really interesting name, Csikszentmihalyi. And what Csikszentmihalyi has done is he asked employees to walk around with pages. And when the pager went off, the employees had to write down what they were doing. And really interestingly, 25% of the time, they were doing absolutely nothing. They were doing things like gossiping, reading the newspaper, etc. And that is a huge amount of money spending on employees doing absolutely nothing. But, and here's the nice thing, if you can train your employees to become more committed to their goals, then as a consequence, the companies will save a lot of money and make a lot of money. So let me give you a really good example that I'm sure you and many of your listeners have already know about. There were studies done with unionized truck drivers. And what they found was that if you could make them more committed to their goals, the company saved a whole lot of money. For instance, in one study, they were able to get unionized truck drivers to increase the amount of logs they put on their trucks from 60% to 90% of the legal allowable weight. And what they found was they made $250,000. Likewise, there was in a second study, they did the same sort of thing. They got these unionized truck drivers to increase their commitment towards their work goals by going to the mill more times per day. And guess what? They made the company $2.7 million just by being more committed to their goals.
Wowee. So, assuming that we're sold on mental toughness training, are there any other techniques aside from POT that could be easily coached in the workplace?
Oh, sure. Firstly, I'm very pleased to see that you remember POT from last time. It was a few weeks ago. But on top of that, let's remember, mental toughness is made up of four parts. One of them is confidence. And what we know is the more confident you are, the better you do anything. All right. And what we also know is there are many ways you can increase confidence. But a really good way, arguably the most effective way, is to increase all four components of GOAT, G-O-A-T, which stand for growth mindset, observe, act, and trust yourself. And the really most important, powerful one is the A, act. You simply have to act to get confidence. Why act is so important is by acting, by getting out there and doing things, you are more likely to have success. And the only way that you get legitimate feelings of confidence is when you get true success. Because then you say to yourself, I have the right to have such feelings of confidence. And so how you do it is quite a simple approach. You set a small goal, achieve it, and then take note that you've achieved it. Then set a harder goal, achieve that, and very importantly, take note that you've achieved it, and just keep using that process. And I might add that it's the same thing for an employer with their employees. Set a easy goal for your employees, get them to achieve it, get them to notice, then do a harder goal, etc. The opposite of throwing people in the deep end. Yes, at times it has worked, but the reality is not a good approach, whereas setting people up for success is much more successful.
Intriguing. It appears to me that there must be a link between mental toughness and conscientiousness. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Without a question of doubt. In fact, I could tell you quite a few studies. Once again, a lot of them done in the United States. There was one that was done with twins. And what they found was exactly as you're saying. All dimensions of mental toughness correlated with conscientiousness. And it's not really surprising when you think about what conscientiousness really is. Conscientiousness is all about things like denying your impulses, your urges, being goal directed. And as a result of doing that, what you'll find is you end up, I call it HOR. You become more hardworking, more organized, and more reliable. You imagine if you are that kind of person, there's no way you can do it without being mentally tough. You have to be mentally tough to be conscientiousness.
Then what is one technique we can use to increase conscientiousness in the workplace then?
Now you're asking an easy question for me. I have an acronym called DAG, D-A-G, which stands for daily, accountable, and good. The D, the daily, is to set daily goals, and it does not need to be complicated. All you have to do is write down 3 things that you want to do. Now, do notice that I said the word write down. It really helps to write down what you want to do, because as soon as you see your words, you say to yourself, that's a bit weak, I can do better, etc. It makes you take it more seriously. All right? The A, accountable, is by setting yourself up to be more accountable. So let's just imagine that you wrote down your 3 goals. To make yourself more accountable, what you could do is you could send it, say, as a text message to one of your friends. And even if they never get back to you and say, did you achieve it? There's the possibility, so you work a little bit harder. And then finally, the G, the good, stands for good things. And very simple and not as threatening. All you have to do is write down 3 things that you did well during the day. And let me just explain why. It's really quite simple. If you know in the morning that at night, 12 hours later, you are going to write down, or you're going to think about what you did good, you work that little bit harder.
Thank you, Adrian. All this sounds really good. It would be surprising to me that there is resistance from organizations when it comes to mental skills training, based on all the benefits of mental toughness that you have mentioned. Have you ever encountered any resistance setting up mental skills training programs then?
You moonlight as a comedian, do you? Without a question of a doubt, I have certainly encountered my fair share of the word no. In fact, almost every single organization I approach initially says the word no, because they're always worried about dollars. Right? It's natural, right? But what you'll find is that with time, you end up being able to win over people. But there are times when it's really hard. For instance, I remember one time, I won't tell you the organization, it was just a CEO of a very important organization. And we're having a nice meeting and everything's going well. And after 5 minutes, he puts his index finger out and virtually pokes me in the chest and says, "We need somebody like you," very encouragingly, and says, "Look, give me a bit of time, I'll get back to you." Well, of course, he never got back to me. And one of the reasons why, he got caught by the BBC secretly taking a bribe to a reporter. But I will add, there is another sad aspect to this story, is that even though he was forced to resign, before he resigned, he actually hired somebody to do something similar to what I did. The problem was, of course, the person he hired was inappropriate. It was a university student, so wasn't that particularly experienced, and was studying something unrelated to what we're on about. So yeah, you will experience, without a question of doubt, a lot of these difficulties.
Okay, so we've confirmed resistance in setting up mental skills programs. How about resistance during the delivery of the training?
Oh, once again, it's the same thing. For instance, I'm a psychologist, and as soon as I say the word psychologist, people get scared. And they get scared about the word psychology. And they also get scared when they hear things like performance improvement, because it means they know that they're going to have to get outside their comfort zone. So you're right from the start, it's tricky. And as soon as I mention the word training, once again, they get scared. But sometimes it can be actually quite amusing. Once again, I'm not going to tell you which country, but it was somewhere in Africa. I was working with a government organization, and it was really funny. There was about 50 to 60 people in the room. And right at the back of the room, on my right, were 3 women. And instead of facing the stage where everything was happening, they faced directly opposite to the other side of the room, facing the other wall. And now morning tea comes, they go off and have their morning tea. And so what I did was I turned the chairs round, roughly 45 degrees or so, maybe a bit more, so they could face the front of the room. Not surprisingly, when they came back, well, what they do, they turned the chairs back so they could look at the wall, have nothing to do with the training whatsoever, completely comfortable in the knowledge that their government jobs were completely safe, regardless of what they did or didn't do. So yeah, you're going to experience some of these things, and you've got to learn to work with it.
It sounds like there are challenges to overcome. Have you faced any while conducting courses on conscientiousness?
Okay, conscientiousness. Well, firstly, I would say that I love teaching conscientiousness, and one of the reasons why it's really powerful. The research is incredibly clear. If you want to perform well, become more conscientious, and there's really nice case studies to show exactly that. Of course, not everybody is so excited about such things because, the reality is there is a number of people who are lazy and all they're doing is they're turning up for the paycheck. But, the reality is that you can normally get around those people. And how I do it is simple. I learned 20, 30 years ago. What you need to do is focus on the most positive people, support their comments when their comments are on mark, encourage them, piggyback their comments. And so I now add to what they say. And whatever you do, do not argue against, fight against the lazy, non-interested, argumentative type. You'll never get anywhere. So basically what you need to do is be a good mentor. Stay calm, in control, be interesting, and you'll do fine.
All right. So, overall, what are the challenges of conducting a comprehensive mental skills training program?
Okay, well, you used the word comprehensive. And if I think back to last time when we did the interview, we talked about having just short programs like a 2-day or a week program, and then something very comprehensive, which might go for 5 years, 10 years, forever. So if we're talking about the second, the latter approach, there's a number of things that you have to do. One of them, without a question of a doubt, you need to be experienced. You can't do this with less than at least a decade of experience. There is just so much information. I mean, I use 270 PowerPoint slides per hour. And if you're working from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, you're talking about somewhere about maybe 7 hours of material, times that by 270, or you can do the maths. And what you'll realize is a huge amount of work that's needed. And if you are going to create a program where people are going to see you, maybe 2 days every 3 months or something like that, you need to have spent a lot of time creating your material, presenting it, people telling you it's no good, editing it. So it takes a huge amount of time. And the more qualifications you have, the more experience you have doing it in different countries, different types of organizations, the better. And the second one I'd say is you really need to stand firm when it really matters, especially with logistical issues. For instance, the length of time of sessions and the number of sessions. The higher up management are always trying to say, oh, you don't need to do as many sessions. Let's cut it down. And the reality is that every single person walking around on this planet has a history of doing things the same way, and oftentimes it's dysfunctional. And you can't change a lifetime of dysfunctional thinking in just 1 or 2 sessions. For instance, very briefly, there's an organization that was been trying to use me, but they're only half-hearted about wanting to change and get outside their comfort zone. They want to do 20-minute sessions. But if you think about a 20-minute session, well, you're going to have 1 or 2 minutes of saying hi, 1 or 2 minutes at the end saying goodbye. So now you're down to 15 or 16 minutes. And if you are talking about something that, it's very personal, how are you going to change somebody only in 15 or 16 minutes? And so what you've got to do is do what Amazon Web Services suggest. Have a look at their website. It's amazing. They have some leadership principles. And one of them they suggest is have backbone and be willing to disagree when necessary. And remember that on the most important things, you need to stand up for what's right. So I might lose the opportunity to work with this organization, miss out on some really good money. But guess what? If I worked with them, I wouldn't do such a good job, and then nobody would be that impressed by me. So it's important to maintain quality.
That's right. Okay, we'll take a final question. So, you must be doing something right to have been in business for decades. Can you share a success story of an organization that was initially not interested, but eventually implemented your training?
Well, as I said before, it's virtually every organization I've worked with has initially said something along the lines of no, because they're worried about the money. Okay, here's an example. There's an organization in the Caribbean that I worked with, and how it came about was I'd already lined up another organization in their country. So I send this organization an email saying, I'm coming to your country, would you like to use my services? The gentleman who got the email looked at it, put it in the bin. 2 weeks later, I send the same email to the same person. He picks it up, puts it in the bin. 2 weeks later again, I write the same email, send it to the same person. He looks at it, and this time he takes it to the CEO and says, look, maybe we should try this. And before you knew it, I was actually in the room training them. But the really interesting thing about this little story is that I had no idea, obviously, that this had happened. I was teaching them about optimism, and I was explaining how optimists do so much better than pessimists because they work harder, because they persist, they don't give up. And what he then did very kindly was, in front of everybody, interrupted and said, Adrian's right. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, and then he explained what had happened. Okay, if this is the final question, well, let's finish on a high. The really nice thing about this organization is that many years later, they're still using my techniques and my exercises.
Thank you, Adrian. And just to remind the audience, Adrian has had 136 organizations that have said yes. So something must be right about this, optimism and persistence. So thank you, Adrian, for sharing some nuggets with us. We appreciate the information and your time. And if you're interested in learning more about Adrian, please follow the links shared in the video for the 2 of his books, and look forward to video 3. Until then, we will see you on another episode of Open Tech Convo. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.